That's A. She Marlena Robbins inishe. Ya idina atachi ni nishle. Toda chitni bashichin. Toda oje dashiche. Tabahan dashanele. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being open to this presentation. My name is Marlena Robbins. I am Diné from Window Rock, Arizona, Crystal, New Mexico area, also known as Tsega Hotsane, Aro Tonitsile. And I am a Doctor of Public Health student, about to start my third year. My research is focused on the advancement of psychedelics in tribal nations, specifically psilocybin. So I first want to acknowledge psilocybin mushrooms and how they have been instrumental in shaping my journey. They came into my life at a pivotal moment. They changed the entire trajectory of my life, and they ultimately helped me embrace and discover my true purpose here. I want to express my deep gratitude for these extraordinary organisms. Psilocybin mushrooms have both impacted my personal life and propelled me to a position where I'm able to amplify voices that may not be heard otherwise. And so, in this privileged role as a researcher, I've been able to interview elders, to hear their stories, interview youth, to stories from elders to youth, spanning generations from the silent generation to Gen Z. Each perspective unique, each story valuable, ultimately asking, what do they think? And what can they teach us? So I interviewed 30 self-identifying urban native individuals living in cities across the Northwest and Southwest United States, ranging ages 20 to 70 years old. And I started with a simple question: what are your perspectives of psilocybin mushrooms? The answers, however, were anything but simple. Each story, each perspective, challenging the traditional narrative we often hear about Native identity and psychedelic use. So these are some of their stories. One powerful conversation I had was with a mother and daughter who live in California, but they're native to Alaska. And they came to psilocybin mushrooms after the suicide of their son and brother. They came to the mushrooms to heal, to grieve, and to understand and rebuild their familial bond, their strength as mother-daughter, to transcend and heal their grief. In New Mexico, in Albuquerque, I spoke with an elder who's been using psilocybin mushrooms for over 50 years to reconnect to nature. And he told me a really great story about taking psilocybin mushrooms before going into ceremony. And it wasn't plant ceremony, it was ceremony. So he was the only one, and it was his personal experiment. And he said he did that so that he could feel the songs, to hear the language clearly, and that when he did that, it opened up a whole new realm of understanding the ceremony. And then there was a woman that I interviewed in her 50s who lives in Seattle, and she grew up in the foster care system, and she ended up homeless. And when her and her friends went to pick the mushrooms, they weren't doing it to party or to get high. They were doing it as a way to escape and as a survival mechanism. So it helped her forget that she was homeless. It helped her forget that she was hungry. It helped her forget that she was cold. In Texas, in Houston, Texas, I interviewed a young man in his 20s who started sitting with the mushrooms during the pandemic. And when he went into isolation and he was forced to sit with his traumas and really try to understand, where is this trauma coming from? How do we heal it? And so his cousin brought the mushrooms to him, and he was actually able to go to Oaxaca and sit with one of the original families who worked very closely with renowned mushroom curandera Maria Sabina. I interviewed a woman in Tempe, Arizona, who grew up in a household where psychedelic use was openly discussed because her parents were a part of the counterculture in the 60s and 70s, and they were also part of the American Indian movement. And so when they talked to their children openly about psychedelics, they made sure to emphasize safety. And so later on in her life, she fell into a deep depression after experiencing a miscarriage. And her friend brought her some mushrooms, and she went and talked to her siblings about it. And they all took them together, and she said that it took the barriers of communication down, and they were able to interact empathetically, to connect, to re-strengthen their familial bond, and to understand the grief, to heal it, to transcend it. I spoke to a woman who lives in LA, and she left the reservation in the 90s. She moved to LA. She left out of rebellion. She left because her family had rejected her all throughout her childhood. The Mormon faith had rejected her all throughout her childhood. And she went to LA, and she partied. She went to concerts, she went to raves, she went to clubs, she dropped acid, she ate mushrooms, and all of this to reformulate her identity, to create a new identity, and to heal the rejection of her family. So these stories are vital. They dispel stereotypes and humanize Native people as contemporary, modern individuals. They show us that the use of psychedelics is not monolithic. It is influenced by popular culture, various spiritualities, and personal politics. Each narrative contributes to a larger conversation about healing, identity, and the human experience. And by listening to these voices, we gain a deeper understanding of the complex role that psychedelics plays in diverse communities. And through these stories of healing and transformation, we've seen how these ancient organisms can offer more than just a biological reaction. They can provide a gateway to deeper understanding and connection. And today we are standing at the threshold of a new era in mental health and economic opportunity. An era marked by a transformative shift in how we understand and legislate psychedelics, particularly psilocybin. And in just a few short years, from 2019 to 2022, we've witnessed an exponential rise in psychedelic reform bills across the US. The number of initiatives surged from 5 in 2019 to 36 in 2022, reflecting a growing societal recognition of the potential benefits of these substances. And a significant 58% of these bills propose decriminalization, with 90% specifically focusing on psilocybin. So this legislative momentum is about changing laws and changing lives. And yet it also signals a burgeoning economic boom. By 2029, the psychedelic industry is projected to reach $11 billion. And by 2037, the majority of states are expected to legalize psychedelics. So this is both a health and economic revolution poised to reshape industries ranging from pharmaceuticals to wellness tourism. And yet, as we embrace this growth, we must also confront the disparities that comes with it. Consider the current landscape of psychedelic-assisted therapy. Sessions can cost between $1,500 to $4,000, while international retreats may cost between $2,000 to $7,000. And these prices put potentially life-changing treatments out of reach for those below the poverty line. Ironically, the very individuals who might benefit the most from these therapies. Furthermore, the compensation for those who administer these treatments reveals a clear inequality. Western practitioners can earn an average of $10,500 per service, which is a stark contrast to the $150 that Indigenous medicine practitioners receive within their own communities. And this disparity reflects both the economic inequality and underscores the broader cultural appropriation, extractivism, biopiracy, bioprospecting of traditional practices and medicines. So as new legislation continues to roll out and pharmaceutical companies intensify their marketing activities, we must ask ourselves, who really benefits from the psychedelic boom? And at what cost? How do we honor and compensate fairly the indigenous knowledge that has paved the way for these advancements? In the next leg of my research, I want to go home. I want to go back to Diné. I want to talk to the elders. I want to talk to the tribal officials, the mothers, the fathers, the youth, asking them about their perspectives of psilocybin mushrooms. Because as we stand on the cusp of new scientific discoveries and legislative changes concerning psilocybin, we're faced with some crucial questions. What comes next? How do we harness these stories of transformation to effect meaningful action within our communities, particularly within the sovereign Navajo Nation, which finds itself at the crossroads of advancing psychedelic research? And as the neighboring states, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, surrounding the Navajo Nation move forward with legislation in psilocybin research, we stand to ask, where do we fit in? How do we as a nation approach this new frontier? My mission is to facilitate these conversations, ensuring they're grounded in respect for tribal sovereignty and are reflective of our community's genuine needs and desires. So do the people feel curious about psilocybin-assisted therapy? Are there apprehensions or oppositions? Or perhaps is there a path forward where we can integrate our traditional practices with new healing modalities? These discussions are foundational. They do not presume to know what the people need, but instead, they seek to uncover the needs directly from the source. And our approach must be thoughtful and inclusive. If the consensus leans against the use of psilocybin, that's completely acceptable. From there, we can develop an educational framework that informs and prepares our community, especially our youth. We're not here to shun or shame the conversation, but to foster awareness, to establish safety measures, and to encourage open and honest dialogues. Many of our interviewees expressed a common theme. They wished for guidance in their youth, someone to delineate the do's and don'ts of this powerful medicine. Their experiences could have been markedly different with informed, supportive guidance. So let us be those guides for the future generations. Let's use the power of our collective voice to build an educational model that prepares and protects our youth as they navigate their paths, perhaps towards these ancient medicines. Today, tonight, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year, I invite each of you to consider how you can contribute to this dialogue, whether by educating yourselves, participating in discussions, or simply by listening with an open heart. Let us remember these stories as we think about the future of psychedelics and therapy and personal growth. Let us continue to learn from each other, to challenge our preconceptions, and to build a more inclusive understanding of this powerful medicine. Thank you.